Welcome to the 11th lecture in the series Introduction to New Testament Textual Criticism. Let's begin with prayer. Heavenly Father, every good and perfect gift comes from you. Often your gifts benefit everyone, like the sunshine and the rain, and we thank you for those things. But we also thank you for the small favors, unknown to the crowd, the things that remind your children that you are the God who sees us. You're the God who hears us. They remind us that each one of us can say, although I am poor and needy, the Lord takes thought of me. We ask for your guidance and protection in the tasks we undertake today. In Jesus' name, Amen. Today, we are going to look at the 1881 Revised Version of the New Testament, and at two of the scholars who influenced the Greek text upon which it was based. But first, it's important to be aware of some factors that led up to the 1881 Revised Version. By 1615, every printed English New Testament that was translated directly from Greek was based on a form of the Textus Receptus, represented by the editions made by Erasmus, Stephanus, and Beza in the 1500s. The main translation of the New Testament in English was the 1611 King James Version, and this was produced with the hope that it would supersede previous English versions, which it did. Although rival translations have appeared, for many English-speaking Christians today, the King James Version continues to be regarded as the English New Testament. Shortly after the publication of the KJV, Codex Alexandrinus, a manuscript from the 400s, was brought to England by Cyril Lucar, and although its text in the Gospels tended to confirm many readings that are in the Byzantine text, its text in Acts and the Epistles tended to support non-Byzantine readings. In the 1700s and early 1800s, diverse manuscripts were discovered and more detailed study of versional evidence was undertaken. Textual researchers such as Bingel, Wettstein, Griesbach, and Schultz used this data to develop a reconstruction of the text's early history, separating readings into three basic groups: Western, Alexandrian, and Byzantine. Griesbach's text was used in the 1800s by a few scholars as the base text of New English translations, but they never had anything close to the popularity level of the King James Bible. And in 1833, Noah Webster produced a mild revision of the KJV in America, basically an update rather than a textual revision, in which the English text was adjusted to a less Jacobean-sounding standard. But this did not satisfy scholars who wanted a new English text of the New Testament to conform to a newly compiled Greek text. In 1844, Constantine Tischendorf visited St. Catherine's Monastery at Mount Sinai, and he obtained some of its pages from the Old Testament. In 1853, he visited St. Catherine's again. In 1859, he visited St. Catherine's Monastery for the third time, and on this visit, he obtained much more of Codex Sinaiticus, including the portion that contained the New Testament. In 1862, he published its text. Now the flagship manuscript of the Alexandrian Text, Codex Vaticanus, had an ally that was almost as old, far older than most other Greek manuscripts. Vaticanus is assigned to the early 300s. Sinaiticus is probably a little later, from the mid-300s. One reason for thinking that Sinaiticus is slightly younger than Vaticanus is that Vaticanus does not have the Eusebian section numbers in its margin, but Codex Sinaiticus does. Before discovering Sinaiticus, Tischendorf had already done important research on a variety of important manuscripts, including Codex C, and he had published several editions of the Greek New Testament. In 1866, in a publication that included his account of how he discovered Codex Sinaiticus, Tischendorf mentioned that he and several of his contemporaries intended to set aside this Textus Receptus and to construct a fresh text derived immediately from the most ancient and authoritative sources. The impact of the discovery of Codex Sinaiticus, which confirmed many Alexandrian readings also found in Vaticanus, may be shown by a consideration of the differences in Tischendorf's own published compilations of the Greek New Testament. After discovering Sinaiticus, Tischendorf changed the text of his own compilation in over 3,400 places. In 1857, before Tischendorf obtained the New Testament portions of Codex Sinaiticus, 5 British churchmen published a revised text of the Gospel of John in English titled The Gospel According to St. John, after the Authorized Version, newly compared with the original Greek and revised by 5 clergymen. Those 5 clergymen were John Barrow, George Moberly, Henry Alford, William Humphrey, and Charles Ellicott. They similarly updated some of Paul's epistles later in the 1850s. These mild revisions assured readers, as stated in the brief preface to the revision of the Gospel of John, that errors in the Authorized Version are very slight and few in comparison of its many and great excellences. A brief notes in the margin informed readers about some of the deviations from the Textus Receptus, but as a whole, there were not drastic deviations from the King James Version. John 7:53 through 8:11 was framed within brackets, but the text was essentially unchanged at John 1:18, 1:34, 3:13, 5:4, 9:34, 5, 14:14, etc. Readers were given the impression that a revision would only minimally affect the English text. Meanwhile, in 1864, in the United States, an organization called the American Bible Union issued a New Testament which mildly updated the text of the KJV. The American Bible Union's revision was not particularly popular, but it was consulted by British translators later on. Charles Ellicott, one of the 5 clergymen responsible for the mild revisions presented in the 1850s, also wrote a series of commentaries in which he strongly advocated many non-Byzantine readings. Encouraged by Ellicott and other researchers, the Church of England sanctioned and sponsored the production of a revised version of the Bible. It was understood that the revisers would operate within a set of rules, of which I will list 3. Number 1. The translators are to introduce as few alterations as possible into the text of the Authorized Version, consistently with faithfulness. Number 2. The translators are to limit, as far as possible, the expression of such alterations to the language of the authorized or earlier versions. Number 3. The text to be adopted is to be that for which the evidence is decidedly preponderating, and when the text so adopted differs from that for which the from which the authorized version was made, the alteration is to be indicated in the margin. However, some fine print open to interpretation accompanied these general rules, and the fine print went along these lines. The members of the revision companies should not be guided by any other principle than the desire to bring the translation as near as they can to the original text. So, in 1870, the revision work began, and it was generally expected that the result would resemble the samples that had already been produced by the 5 clergymen. Of those 5, 4 of them, Ellicott, Moberly, William Humphrey, and Henry Alford, were on the new translation committee, although Alford passed away in 1871. Now, a Unitarian named George Vance Smith was also on the translation committee, and when a resolution was passed by the Church of England stating that no person who denies the Godhead of our Lord Jesus Christ should be on the translation committee, several Anglican committee members threatened to resign if George Vance Smith was not allowed to be a member. And so, by a 3-vote majority, the lower house of convocation allowed George Vance Smith to participate. Once the project began, with expectations of a modest revision in which every divergence from the Textus Receptus would be noted in the margin, things changed. By the 1870s, Western scholars were aware of the existence of about 1,000 manuscripts. The Translation Committee of the New Testament tended to focus especially upon Vaticanus and Sinaiticus, and tended to prefer readings shared by these 2 manuscripts. This was due to a large extent to the influence of 2 committee members named Brooke False Westcott and Fenton John Anthony Hort. In 1851, Hort had already referred to the New Testament-based text of the KJV as that vile Textus Receptus. In 1853, Hort had written about his intention to work with Westcott to supply clergymen generally, schools, etc., with a portable Greek Testament which shall not be disfigured with Byzantine corruptions. Inasmuch as most of the New Testament in the King James Version consist of Byzantine readings, this meant that the revised text of the New Testament was not going to be a mild revision, like what had been presented in the 1850s by the 5 clergymen. It was going to be a version based on the replacement of the Byzantine text with the Alexandrian text, the kind of compilation that Hort had intended to make ever since 1853. Westcott and Hort were 2 of the translation committee members who had threatened to resign if George Vance Smith was not given a seat on the committee. Now, does that mean they were theologically liberal? Many letters of both Hort and Westcott have been collected and published, and although at some points they both make statements that seem perfectly orthodox, at other times Hort especially says some things that would probably cause most conservatives to think that they detected a doctrinal problem. Here I cite a few statements from Hort's letters, and since these letters are all available online, I leave it to interested listeners to investigate the context if they imagine the context will somehow make them seem more palatable. First, regarding politics during the American Civil War, Hort wrote, "The American Empire is a standing menace to the whole civilization of Europe." He also wrote, "It cannot be wrong to desire and pray from the bottom of one's heart that the American Union may be shivered to pieces." And in 1865, Hort wrote, "I cannot say that I see much as yet to soften my deep hatred of democracy in all its forms." Regarding racial equality, Hort wrote, "Black people everywhere, not in slavery only, have surely shown themselves only as an immeasurably inferior race, just human and no more, their religion frothy and sensuous, their highest virtues those of a good Newfoundland dog." Except Hort didn't say black people. Regarding the nature of hell, in 1859, Hort wrote, "I do not see how to dissent from the equally common universalist objection that finite sins cannot deserve an infinite punishment." Regarding the historicity of events in Genesis 3, in 1848, Hort wrote, "I am inclined to think that no such state as Eden, I mean the popular notion, ever existed, and that Adam's fall in no degree differed from the fall of each of his descendants." And Westcott expressed a similar position. Now, one reason why we have little more than these indications of unorthodox beliefs in the public works of Westcott and Hort is that Hort realized the advantages of strategic discretion when it came to promoting their doctrinal beliefs. Hort advised his colleague Lightfoot, "Depend on it. Whatever either you or I may say in an extended commentary, if only we speak our mind, we shall not be able to avoid giving grave offense to the miscalled orthodoxy of the day." In 1861, Hort wrote to Westcott, "I have a sort of craving that our text should be cast upon the world before we deal with matters likely to brand us with suspicion. I mean a text issued by men already known for what will undoubtedly be treated as dangerous heresy, will have great difficulties in finding its way to regions where it might otherwise hope to reach." That does not sound very far at all from saying, let's keep quiet about our beliefs regarding some doctrinal subjects so that people will not use that as an objection against the textual revision that we intend to publish. Now, Hort was officially Anglican, but he sympathized with Unitarians, and that the Universalists noticed that. In 1875, in the Unitarian Review, textual scholar Ezra Abbott commented, "Every scholar must look with great interest for the publication of the long-promised critical edition of the Greek Testament undertaken by Dr. Westcott and Mr. Hort." Looking at Hort's letters and his disposition toward Unitarianism, it looks like a reasonable case can be made that Hort harbored some unorthodox beliefs. Now, some writers have accused Westcott and Hort of being associated with the occult. A part of the reason for this seems to have been some confusion of Brooke Westcott, the Oxford professor, with W. Westcott, an entirely different person. But there are 2 other reasons which are more concerning. First, in 1851, Hort and Westcott were both charter members of a club at Oxford called the Ghostly Guild. Hort refers to it openly in his letters and described it as a society for the investigation of ghosts and all supernatural appearances and effects, being all disposed to believe that such things really exist, and ought to be discriminated from hoaxes and mere subjective delusions. Now, it is entirely possible that Hort changed his view later, but in December of 1851, that is how Hort described his position. We are all disposed to believe that ghosts really exist. A second, Hort mentions in a letter written to his wife in October of 1864 that he attended an event with the De Morgan couple. He stated, "We tried to turn tables, but the creatures wouldn't stir." That is a reference to Augustus and Sophia de Morgan, who were spiritists who conducted seances, as anyone can see by consulting their 1863 book, From Matter to Spirit, the result of 10 years of experience in spirit manifestations. That book's opening chapter contains instructions about how to conduct a table-tipping session in which one attempts to communicate with spirits. That is what Hort was referring to in his reference to turning tables. Now, one could say in Hort's defense that he might have attended the seance out of courtesy to friends. He mentions no other seances in his other letters, but if a preacher told his congregation, "I am disposed to believe in ghosts, and I just finished attending a seance the other day," it would probably be a concern. It seems strange that so few people today seem willing to acknowledge that it is a valid concern when the compiler of a New Testament base text has said basically the same thing. Now, objections of this sort are typically dismissed as examples of what is called the genetic fallacy. The idea is that just because a fox is a fox, that doesn't prove that it cannot guard the henhouse. Well, crying genetic fallacy does not settle all questions and all concerns about Hort's doctrinal views. But to fairly evaluate Hort's approach, we need to separate that from Hort himself. Many textual critics in Hort's generation and afterwards found Hort's approach persuasive, and their doctrinal views vary from one individual to another. Meanwhile, what about Westcott? Well, Westcott was generally a conservative and devout, and some of his views on technical subjects, though, apparently fluctuated. In 1855, Westcott told his readers that it was an almost universal opinion that the Syriac Peshitta was assigned to the most remote Christian antiquity. But at some point before 1881, he must have changed his mind. Some of Westcott's letters from 1870 reveal a deliberate strategy on the part of Westcott, Hort, Charles Ellicott, and Joseph B. Lightfoot to make the Revised Version a much more extensive revision than its sponsors in the Church of England had initially expected it to be. In 1871, Lightfoot wrote in detail about the need for extensive revision of the Greek New Testament. These four scholars, Westcott, Hort, Ellicott, and Lightfoot, made such a heavy impact upon the Revised Version of the New Testament that one could say that it pounded out the counter-impact of the other scholars on the translation committee. Some of the other committee members were not very active, and Scrivener was on the committee, but he was often outvoted regarding questions of what Greek text was to be translated into English. When the English Revised Version was published in 1881, it was only a few days after Westcott and Hort's Revised Greek New Testament was also published, in May. This had the effect of preventing the public from being aware of the extent of the revision until its publication. Meanwhile, in the 1870s, while the Revised Version was slowly being made, an Anglican scholar named John Burgon discerned what kind of New Testament text the revisers were likely to produce, considering what members of the revision committee had already written about the Greek text. Burgon anticipated what was coming. In 1871, he wrote a very detailed defense of Mark 16, 9-20, the last 12 verses of Mark defended. And along the way, he conveyed strong support for the Byzantine text. He also pointed out problematic readings in the Alexandrian Text, such as its unusual reading in Matthew 27:49. After the Revised Version was published, Burgon published a series of essays offering the basis for the position that the Revised Version was untrustworthy from beginning to end. The Revised Version was not a success. This was due in part to Burgon's strident and detailed opposition, but primarily it was a consequence of the poor quality of the English translation itself. Reviewers inevitably compared it to the KJV and tended to conclude that while reading the KJV was like riding in a royal carriage down a paved road, reading the Revised Version was like riding in a broken-down carriage on a rough dirt road. Some readers also observe that although the revised version of the English text did not fully reflect the Greek text edited by Westcott and Hort, it deviated chronically from the Textus Receptus, and footnotes to indicate where this was done were very frequently absent. To many readers, the revised version looked like a textual bait-and-switch. The revisions in the 1850s had been very mild, and the revised version of 1881 was unquestionably drastic. And if that is how it seemed in English to readers of the KJV and the revised version, it was even more obviously drastic to scholars who could read the Textus Receptus and the new compilation from Westcott and Hort. Yet, although the revised version in English did not dethrone the King James Version, the Greek text of Westcott and Hort was rapidly embraced by scholars as a Greek New Testament superior to the Textus Receptus, even if the claim built into its title that it was the original text was treated with skepticism. Now, what was revolutionary about the approach advocated by Westcott and Hort? The Greek text that went into the 1881 revised version was primarily Byzantine. The Greek text that came out from the revised version was primarily Alexandrian. What happened? Why was the revision made by Westcott and Hort considered superior to the previous compilations made by earlier researchers such as Griesbach and Schultz? What happened was the adoption of Hort's model of textual transmission, which Hort explained in an introduction that appeared about 6 months after the compilation itself in 1881. And God willing, we will look into the details of Hort's model of the history of the Greek text in our next lecture. In closing, I encourage you to download Hort's introduction, and also download John Burgon's The Revision Revised, and read its 32-page preface, including the opening remarks from Scrivener. Since it seems customary in some circles to criticize the tone that Burgon frequently used in his writing, it's worth pointing out what Burgon himself says about that. I slightly paraphrase him here. If anyone complains that I have sometimes hit my opponents rather hard, I take this opportunity to point out that to everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the sun, a time to embrace, and a time to be far from embracing, a time for speaking smoothly, and a time for speaking sharply. And when the words of inspired Scripture are seriously endangered, as now they are, it is scarcely possible for one who is determined to effectively preserve in their integrity the words that God has entrusted to His church to hit either too straight or too hard. Thank you.